Hey everybody, Jason Burmis here with Taylor Hudak, one of the founding members of Action for Assange, a citizen journalist, and you're doing a lot more these days.
They go on about once a month. I am also a journalist and editor with Activism Munich. It is a nonprofit news organization based in Munich, Germany, and so I've been reporting on Assange, of course, through Activism Munich, and also some other issues as well I'm going to start getting into. But it's been great. It's been a platform where I can speak about the issue freely and not have the sort of mainstream media spin on things, right?
Yep, and this coming September, we have the next step in these Assange hearings. I won't even call it a trial. How can people get involved in that? Because, you know, Andrew was on the show yesterday. He was talking to people. And if we can get tens of thousands of people out there for George Floyd, I don't know why we can't get hundreds, if not thousands, if not more, for Julian Assange.
Exactly. I would love to see that amount of people out protesting and showing support for Assange. So in September, my colleagues will be in DC. I won't be there. I plan on being in London if I could travel there. Hopefully by then we'll be able to.
Where do we go here? Do we go right, I guess?
Yeah. It's really gorgeous, by the way, guys. Like where we're at, it is so pretty.
It is kind of pretty here.
Park.
Yeah.
But anyways, my colleagues with Action for Assange, they're going to be hosting a series of demonstrations and protests for Assange. You could find out more information about that at action4assange.com. And you interviewed Andrew yesterday. Well, I'm sure you talked about that, but great thing to do. I believe you were there last time, weren't you, Jason?
Yeah, I went down.
Okay.
Yep. I'm hoping to come down this next time, but then again, if it's in the beginning of September, I plan on moving by then, so I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm going to be doing. I don't know if I'm going to be hauling it across the country with a U-Haul or I don't know yet. I don't know. The next spot's going to be Missouri, but it's got to be better than New York. I mean, this is better than New York.
Oh, yeah. Now, there's not like a whole lot of people around, but at least in Ohio, and I know you touched on this earlier, people are not having to wear masks, which I think is a good thing. I'm obviously not a proponent of masks, and I saw also that Joe Biden says that if he becomes president, he's going to mandate it.
Mandate it.
It's so problematic. So problematic.
And people are behind that. And meanwhile, you know, you have Cuomo sitting there talking about how it's a great thing for mandatory masks. Is this the dead end? Is this it?
No.
Maybe we're going to end up turning around.
Okay.
I guess it is. You said there was like waterfalls here. Is this where the waterfall is usually?
You know what? It might be usually there.
Right?
I've never been here before myself. I never been here before, but I just picked it out. It's actually quite pretty.
No, it is really nice, and it's actually cool over here, whereas I'm sweating my face off.
Yeah, it is so hot.
But we're going to walk back right into the heat.
Yeah, it's okay.
So, Julian Assange right now, his lawyers have to contend with this new add-on to the indictment, although there's no new charges. Basically, they try to reassert that he's a cyber terrorist working with other cyber terrorists or groups, and LulzSec was one of those groups. What was your take on the DOJ putting out those additions to the indictment but no actual charges?
Yeah, that was really interesting. What it did, this indictment, is it broadened the scope of the already existing charge, which was conspiracy to commit computer intrusion, which is hacking. This indictment, I want to make note before I get into exactly what's in the indictment, is the fact that it is based off of the testimony of two government informants, unreliable individuals. One of them is a convicted sex predator.
Oh!
Yes. The FBI stooped so low to actually work with this person. So that is who the indictment is based off of, their testimony. Now, again, like I said, it just alleges that Assange was conspiring with the hacking group LulzSec, which at the time, it was led by, not Sigi, Hector Monsegur, Sabu. And it does seem as if this was possibly entrapment, because at that time, Sabu was working with the FBI. Actively.
That's right. Before Assange had really done anything that they brought up in the indictment, this guy was already compromised and working for the FBI.
Exactly.
And you got to ask yourself, you know, they've had this information for how long, Taylor? They didn't charge him with any of it, and they didn't use it in the initial indictment. And, I mean, we're talking about stuff that's almost 10 years old that they're bringing to light now. It seems like it's not only a smear campaign, but to kind of broaden the reach of who they might net in while this goes on.
Exactly. I think that they secured possibly someone to testify against Assange. I think they realized that Jeremy Hammond wasn't going to testify. He refused. Chelsea Manning was not going to testify. So I'm thinking they either got Sabu or Sigi to testify. And I think this indictment is really trying to distance Assange in his work from that of a journalist. And that's a great way to get the public to not want to support him if they see him as a criminal. And, oh, this is not a journalist. This is somebody who conspired to hack and leak, or not leak, but publish information. So that, I think, is the distinction that they're trying to make. They failed miserably when they tried to make this distinction during the first part of the hearings back in February. So I think this is their attempt to try that again.
So let's talk about that, because you were the only person that was on the ground overseas outside of the court hearings. And first of all, let's point out, he was treated like he was fucking Hannibal Lecter. Okay? He's not a murderer. He's not a rapist. He's not a predator. He's not a serial killer. He's not a physical threat to anybody. And they put him in a fucking soundproof glass fucking box in the back of the court, making it impossible for him to even speak with his lawyers as these show hearings were going on. Do you feel that it was postponed because they realized how sloppy they were, how terrible they were?
Well, it was interesting that the judge at first was trying not to postpone this hearing, and I think that's just because it was a request made by the defense, and historically she's been very much on the side of the prosecution. I do think perhaps the main issue was the fact that witnesses and other people who had to participate in this hearing would not be able to fly to London. She was saying that perhaps they could participate via like Skype, but you do have to wonder if they were trying to buy more time, especially when we see this new indictment that comes out. So it is very suspect. It's interesting, and I believe in court, Assange's own attorney said they were really stunned to find this out by the media. They were not even issued this full indictment. They found out through the media, which is so inappropriate. I don't think that's proper procedure at all. Yeah,
because I'm trying to think, it must have been maybe a little over a week ago they released that. I know it was just before I left, and I actually brought it up, and I brought the PDF file they put out there. And again, no new charges. Here, I think this is the way we're gonna go. Okay. No new charges, but again, associating him with other hackers, other people. Again, cyber terrorism is at the forefront of this bad boy, and that kind of coincides with the broader scope of the counterterrorism measures 2020 to 2022 in this country, where if you're a leaktivist, if you're a hacktivist, if you're a public disclosure organization like WikiLeaks, you are now on the level of ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Hezbollah, North Korea, and Iran. And a lot of people look at me and they're like, what are you talking about, Jason? I didn't hear that on InfoWars or Alex Jones. That's not real. And I'm like, it's fucking real. Yeah. And for Trump to sign off on that and then have somebody like Rick Grenell kind of at the forefront of this Assange indictment, extradition, is extremely problematic when a guy like Roger Stone, who shouldn't have been convicted, but is convicted, goes on Jones this week, and he starts praising Rick Grenell. I wanted to puke. I wanted to puke. He's sitting there.
I didn't catch this. That's interesting. But I feel like he shouldn't be praising him, but I feel like he is probably quite nervous. I mean, considering his situation.
Well, that's the thing, basically the judge had said that they weren't going to postpone his hearing for detention, right? Yeah. Or when he's going to go there or whatever. And he went on Jones. It was the first time he'd been on there since he'd been gagged. And he started talking, first of all, about how he's reaffirmed his Catholic faith. Because, Roger Stone was always a man of God. The guy that helped bring modern day lobbying to the forefront with Paul Manafort and others. Like the main problem in our government right now, that you can have private money go into the pockets of politicians so that they can get favors. That guy, he's a man of God now. And he started talking about not only putting into the hands of Jesus Christ, but how Rick Grenell was one of the great allies of the Trump administration. And while you were out overseas, we were in DC interviewing Cassandra Fairbanks. Yeah. And of course, Cassandra Fairbanks revealed that this was basically all of Rick Grenell's work, and that Grenell himself had either showed Don and Don Jr., amongst others, photographs, video evidence that somehow the information that was leaked by Assange had killed citizens, had killed soldiers, and even children.
Right.
However, that completely contradicts what came out in previous hearings.
Exactly. It was quite stunning that they had to admit this. The prosecution had to admit during the first part of the hearings that there was no evidence at all to suggest that anyone was killed or was harmed as a result of any WikiLeaks publications. They just say, well, people could have been hurt, which Assange himself even said that anytime there's an issue where the U.S. is embarrassed for information to be put forward, they always use this national security sort of excuse that somebody could have been hurt, or they are very quick to bring up the potential harm that could be caused.
And that's the thing, guys. Look, I'm not for the national security state. If I were going to criticize Assange in any way, shape, or form, it's that he overly protected these motherfuckers and went through and actually redacted things for them when I don't think it was necessary. But he did so that when they tried to trap him with this idea that he was responsible for the death of U.S. soldiers and allies, it would be disproven in court. And it has been. But
it's still brought up. It's
exactly
still brought up. It was actually Julian Assange and I think other WikiLeaks staff members who took initiative to redact the names, and it was actually The Guardian, Luke Harding and another journalist, I can't remember who it was, but they published the password to very sensitive, unredacted cables, I believe
That's
it was.
right.
Yes.
Yep.
They published that in a book. It was the chapter to a book.
Okay.
So it's actually The Guardian that was quite careless.
Yeah, they were, exactly. And that was brought up by Assange's lawyers, but again, the mainstream media is bringing up almost none of his defense at all. They're acting like it's a foregone conclusion that not only is he going to come to this country, but that he's going to be convicted. And unfortunately, if he is extradited to this country, there's almost no doubt there's 100% conviction chance.
Oh, that's exactly right. We hear sometimes from certain groups that Assange will be safe if he is brought to the United States. Unfortunately, that is very, very false, not true at all. You could say that just about 100%, if he is extradited to the U.S., he will be convicted because he's being tried he will be tried in the Eastern District Court of Virginia, which is known as the Espionage Court. And all of this information that he has that people think will get out during trial, it won't, because it's a secret hearing.
It's almost like a military tribunal, guys. It's almost like a military tribunal. And they have 100% conviction rate. And if you know anything about due process and our court systems, any legitimate court, guess what? They don't have 100% conviction rate. That's not a thing.
No.
All right, if you have 100, you might as well be living in a China-style government, which we really are. And, while you have Pompeo out there saying, this is the Chinese virus and it came from the lab in Wuhan. And yes, what's going on with that Hong Kong declaration by China basically saying that they don't have a separate government, espionage and terrorism. Yeah, that's horrible shit. But we do the same thing here. And we've actually taken it a step further. Whereas China's saying, well, you could be a terrorist if you're speaking overseas, but they're not trying to extradite you. We are trying to extradite an Australian citizen. Now, there have been some people within the Australian government that have stepped up, have raised their voice, but much to no avail, yes?
Yeah, you're exactly right. There are two MPs in Australia who have stood up, and Wilkie and the other one, I can't remember his name at this time, but there are two who have stepped up and said that this is wrong and that he must be freed. So that is good, and hopefully we see more and more people step up like this, specifically people who are in the government, Congress people. I think this will be solved on a more, say, diplomatic level than maybe necessarily by people on the ground, but it can be if you do, get yourself involved, like in Action for Assange's demonstrations that they're going to be holding. But another problem too, the reason why the U.S. is so able to get away with these things over and over again is because we have a complicit media that doesn't talk about it. The media is always very willing to point out the flaws of other countries like China and Russia and Iran. But when it comes to our own wrongdoing in the U.S. and how we are very authoritarian, especially now with this COVID, whatever you want to call it.
COVID 1984?
Yeah. A pandemic. I believe that's what Steve and Andrew call it. we're so willing to let that pass, which is a big problem, and it's why this continues to happen.
You know, I'm glad you talked about the COVID 1984 pandemic and, you know, the double standard of how, you know, we like it when certain leaks come out against our enemies, right?
Yeah.
However, if Assange posts something that's against American interests or globalist interests, well, that's a big deal. Eric Schmidt actually wrote about that very thing in The New Digital Age with Jared Cohen, using WikiLeaks as the example that they would viciously go after WikiLeaks on that level, but then encourage leaks from other nations. Now, Eric Schmidt just did a forum with Henry Kissinger and others, a virtual forum, now that, you know, there's no Bilderberg this year, and it was put on by Johns Hopkins University, you know, that authoritative source for COVID 1984.
Right.
Have not watched the whole thing, read a Neil Ferguson article on it, but I always think it's interesting when somebody weighs in on some of these issues. And Eric Schmidt said, you know, with China in particular, we need to have a co-opetition model. A co-opetition. So in other words, he took cooperation and competition. He thought he was fucking clever, and he put them together, and he used Samsung and Apple as an example. That, you know, well, they've got different smartphones and they're on different platforms, but they use the same parts, so they cooperate. And when a guy like Eric Schmidt, who's for Dragonfly, helped them create a censored internet over in China, is still pulling the strings here, that's extremely problematic. We can't have a sliding scale system of freedom. No, it has to be across the board. And to me, Taylor, it's crazy that more citizens not only aren't standing up and screaming about this, but not saying we need to hold these unaccountable billionaires accountable for their actions, not only here, but overseas.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's being held accountable. And again, it goes back to because the media is so complicit in this. Most people, unfortunately, still get their news, I think, from probably mainstream media, especially older. But, you know, younger generations are transitioning to more independent media and going to places like YouTube. But still, a lot of people are getting misinformation. And when your media is complicit in these acts and they're not reporting on these things, like they were silent about the Jeffrey Epstein story, and were then caught on tape complaining about it, just so they could get access to some like tabloidy, gossipy wedding. So that's it.
And what she's referring to is basically if you started talking bad about the royal family, then you didn't have access to the royal family. And so many people think because Prince Andrew has been one of the larger figures that have been brought into this, somehow he's going down. I got news for you. The royal family don't fuck around.
Yeah.
Like, you know, we're talking about who's going to get burned in this thing, right? And we had that conversation with Andrew the other day, and I said, look, you might get somebody like Bill Richardson or a George Mitchell that's been out there. You're not going to get an Ehud Barak, and you're certainly not going to get a Prince Andrew who's royal bloodlines and the arms dealer to Saudi fucking Arabia. I'm sorry, I wish they were, but it's not realistic. And when you have someone like Alan Dershowitz, okay, which is a very complicated figure, he was actually an attorney for Assange at some point. You got to wonder if he was in there as a mole or he was actually helping.
Exactly.
You know?
I wonder that myself. But what I found really interesting and quite confusing as well is the fact, why was Ghislaine Maxwell in the United States? Like, how dumb?
Because she couldn't get out. So here's my thought on that.
After Epstein was arrested, like last year, you would think that she would make plans to flee.
So yeah, but the problem was that the first reports before that In-N-Out Burger thing where she was with that dude in Boston. She was with that tech guy in Boston, and then you look at what this New Hampshire house was, he bought it for her. He set up a fake LLC. He paid in cash. So basically, this is my problem. If the Daily Mail had information that bitch was in Boston back then, a year plus ago, you know the FBI knew. You know the CIA knew, you know the NSA knew, you know Homeland Security knew, at least at the top levels. And they did nothing for over a year. Now, the House...
She has COVID-19 now.
That's not true. That's not true.
It's not true.
No, that's the National Observer. That's a fake website.
Oh.
The South Observer. I saw it too.
I saw it being retweeted and circulated.
Oh,
I'm like, this can't be
all right. So
real.
let's just do it. Let's do it quick. There, at first, as soon as she was arrested, somebody says they took a screenshot of the BBC and the date on it was like July 11th. So what's today, the 6th, I think, or 7th, something like that?
This
6th or the 7th?
Wait, it's the 6th.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, the person that took this screenshot was saying, well, they put it up by accident, but they were getting ready to roll it out on the 11th, okay? That gets taken down. Somebody took a picture of a monitor of an Instagram post, supposedly, of that, okay? I don't know whether it was photoshopped or whatever. Now, the claim is that the BBC made a DMCA, so a dispute against it, saying they own the property. All right?
Okay.
Now, if that's true, I would say this. It said BBC, like right on it, bbc.com. That could be just the DMCA for the photoshopping. I need real evidence that somehow a story that was supposed to come out a week later by the media was actually screenshotted. That's one.
Yeah.
On top of that, yesterday, there was a, like a hardtimes.net/Babylon B article from something that doesn't sound like that, saying that she had contracted COVID and, they were going to do something with her. No doubt, if she contracts COVID and then gets put on a ventilator, yeah, we got problems.
Yeah.
We got big, big problems.
I don't think that I don't think that she's going to end up being suicided.
It would be, listen,
It would be too obvious at that point. But again,
they did it to Jeff.
no, they did, but to do it to another person as well. So
yeah, he did
close
it twice.
to the time.
He did it twice. Like that's the thing. Like again, I guess I'll tell the story another time. But when I was sitting there with my brother and we're watching a UFC pay-per-view, and all of a sudden the news comes in, they arrested him on the New Jersey tarmac. I'm fucking so happy. I go live. I'm like elated. I'm like, we got him. This is it. We're gonna start taking down the unit. My brother's sitting right next to me, dude. Nothing's gonna fucking happen. He ain't gonna make it. There's no trial. Yeah. And I'm like, dude, there's no way they could let this guy die. Then the first suicide attempt happens, and I'm like, no, but he didn't die. And then, of course, Nicholas Tartiglione and whether he was attacked, and there's no tapes. And I'm like, well, they tried it the first time. There's no way they could try it a second time. No one will believe it.
Right.
And they did it.
Happens. Yeah, that's a good point. And that prison in particular didn't have suicides for like over a decade.
Yeah, 13 years.
Yeah. So it's so ridiculous, all of it. But I agree with you. I don't think that people like Prince Andrew are going to be held accountable
that's the other
for
thing.
any of this, unfortunately.
Don't you think, like the media sits there and they talk about it and they're like, well, she's ready to give up everybody. How the fuck do you know? No one's got access to that woman that's not in there. Like, as far as I know, she still hasn't been moved from New Hampshire. She's not having any court in New Hampshire. It's going into Manhattan. And the other conspiracy theories that are floating around are, there's no mugshot, there's no this. I'm like, dude, you're going to see her in court. The question is, do we get her to trial? That's the big important thing. And when you have Bill Barr, Department of Justice, Department of Injustice, who is leading the way against Julian Assange, somebody on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So you got somebody that's guilty as fuck by every stretch of the imagination in abusing children, as probably the most notorious prisoner in the United States right now. And then the most notorious prisoner globally would be Julian Assange, which we're trying to bring in on the complete opposite, where he is revealing war crimes, where he is revealing corruption, where he is revealing the demonic practices of the predator class, and that Justice Department's going after him too. It doesn't really make me like all warm and fuzzy that we're getting them.
No, and you would have to have faith in the justice system to actually think that things will be carried out appropriately in this case. So
Taylor, what do you got going on coming up outside of the world of action for Assange?
Outside of the world of action for Assange. Well, again, like I said earlier, I am a journalist with Activism Munich now. I met up with them back in February, and so I've been posting updates on the case of Assange. And then also, too, unfortunately, there is another case to cover that is Craig Murray's as well. So I'll also be putting out videos about his case.
What's going on with Craig Murray? 'Cause Craig Murray has been one of the more honest journalists, one of the honest journalists covering the Assange case. So what's going on with him?
Yes, well, many are saying that this has to do with a blog post, I believe, but this is just very early stages. There's been one previous hearing. I was not able to attend that virtually, but there is going to be one tomorrow. So we'll learn more about this case then, and I'll put out a video about that explaining what's going on. But many are suspecting this is also too a retaliation of his support for Assange. It seems like the people around Assange are now being targeted as well, and we saw even in the indictment, just for helping Snowden seek refuge. WikiLeaks staff members are being referenced in the indictment. Everybody knows who they're referring to, but they give them code names.
Yeah, which is ridiculous.
Which is, yeah, it's ridiculous.
But it shows the cartoon nature of this whole thing, and the fact that nobody in the mainstream anyway is digging in whatsoever. You might get a mention on Tucker Carlson, but that's about it. There's no mention on MSNBC. There's no mention on CNN. There's no mention on any of the main nightly news shows. How do we pierce that? How do we get it so we demand that they not only cover it, but cover it in a semi-fair manner? Is there any way to do it?
I mean, that's really tough. I would say you should probably watch.
Sorry. Oh, and actually, this is way better connection too. So 25 minutes, it wasn't that great. Go ahead. So how do we do it?
That's a great question. I don't know if it's really possible because, again, these corporate media organizations are owned by the very people they should be investigating and holding to account. So I would say you have to actively seek out independent news on your own. Your channel, Action for Assange, Activism Munich.
Steve from Slow News Day.
Yes, Steve.
See, I don't know where this one goes. Maybe we'll go back around this way. Right? We came in this way, right? Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, because this is taking us all. Yeah, this one's taking us all the way up there. I think that's too much.
Okay.
Unless you want to take the long walk.
It's pretty hot.
That's what I thought.
Actually, I don't know where we're at right now.
Well, we did the loop. We came in this way. So if we go back that way and not this way, then we don't come out that way.
I'm really bad with directions. So.
Oh, so there you have it, guys. Listen, in September, make sure that you are letting people know what is going on. And if you can, get out in the streets. Listen, it doesn't just have to be in DC. It doesn't just have to be overseas in the UK. It can be in your neighborhood. Look, you look at all this George Floyd stuff, right? And yeah, it's got big money behind it, but it's got people in the streets. If we could get a fraction of that, perhaps we could put this issue to the forefront, because people have to understand, once you criminalize exposing war crimes on the level they can take you out of your country, detain you for over 10 years, smear you as a fucking rapist, torture you while you're waiting for your hearings by stripping you down and dehumanizing you ultimately to get you here, we're in big fucking trouble. And that's where we're at. If that's not like far away, that's the past. That's what's happened. Okay? And again, no one's paying attention to the drone bombings in Yemen. No one's talking about the corruption in Afghanistan, Iraq, and particularly Syria, outside of WikiLeaks, who's publishing the OPCW documents that, guess what? No one seems to be talking about.
Right, nobody's talking about it. It was one way to get both the left and the right in the US against Assange, because it's something that neither political affiliation wants to talk about. Throughout history, WikiLeaks short history, it's only been around since 2006, but traditionally its base of support has shifted outside of the, obviously, people who have supported Assange and are activists, but I mean, politically, as far as their support with people in like the U.S. mainstream, it's always been based upon what they leak. So we saw with the Hillary Clinton emails and all of that, and that really Assange was demonized by those on the left because of that. Whereas before, with the Iraq and Afghanistan war logs, or Afghan war logs, we saw Assange really being praised by those on the left. So it changes, but this was the one leak, the OPCW leak, where nobody talked about it.
That's right, nobody talked about it. And there was a time when the media would challenge somebody like a George W. Bush on the findings of WikiLeaks, of what was going on in Guantanamo Bay, at Abu Ghraib, in other black sites. And now we flipped it on its head, where there are a bunch of people following imaginary heroes on message boards, thinking they can trust the plan, and that the deep state is going to be taken down and taken to Gitmo, as if that's like a place we should have open. I mean, the talk of closing Guantanamo Bay is not talk at all. But in 2008, when Joey B was running for president and Hillary Clinton was running for president and fucking Barack Obama and all the little minions over there, They all said they had a plan to get us out of Iraq and close Guantanamo Bay. And here we are over a decade later. Not only is that not on the table, they are looking to expand their military presence in the Middle East. And that's more than problematic. That's treasonous. Okay, it's treasonous that Joe Biden was a part of Operation Timber Sycamore and the CIA going in and arming the quote-unquote rebels over in Syria and beginning that war. And no one's talking about it. So, guys, we're talking about it, and we're trying to get you active as well. So this September, make sure that if you can, come to DC. I'm going to try to get there. We'll see what happens. If you can go overseas, if you are overseas, I know I've got some UK, some Scotland people. Get out there. Get outside of these hearings. Demand that Julian Assange be set free, that he not be extradited here. Because I'll tell you right now, if he's extradited here, it's pretty much game over. You can find Taylor Hudak at Taylor Hudak.
At _ Taylor Hudak. It is a very common name, and oftentimes some random person, Taylor Hudak, that has the handle at Taylor Hudak gets tagged in a lot of my posts or people that repost. So it's at _ Taylor Hudak, and also follow Action for Assange at Action _ 4 Assange, and
what are the YouTube channels?
Action for Assange is just Action _ 4 Assange on YouTube, and then Activism Munich is Act TV Activism Munich, and it's on YouTube as well, and I frequently share my work on Twitter.
Awesome, awesome. And guys, remember, I am fully demonetized on this channel. $5, $10, $15 means the world to me. The GoFundMe link is down below. Big donors need you more than ever. Probably heading to Missouri in the morning, and just trying to find all that freedom in America. Again, look how gorgeous it is here. It's so nice here, and they want to sell you on a divided country. They want to sell you on a bigoted country. They want to sell you on an overpopulated world. Looks who overpopulated. I mean, this is outside.
That's a good point.
We're like, what, 10 miles from Cleveland? Not even?
We are literally, I think like 10 miles from Cleveland, just outside. And trust me, this whole area of Ohio is not, I wouldn't even call it suburbia. I would call it rural Ohio. That's a really good point.
It is. You know, you're outside of a main city. It's got, you know, obviously the Cleveland Indians, they're about to change their name, but the Cavaliers, and that's not the only city. They got Cincinnati. It's a large landmass, but it's spread out. This is a huge park, and we're the only one. Yeah, so overpopulated. Like, we're the only ones walking down the trail. We saw 5 people on the way through here. So don't fall for the hype. Thumbs it up, join the Burmese Brigade, and I will see you guys later on the flip side.